Alrighty, so I'd like to reopen the Harwich Board of Selectmen's meeting for December 16, 2019. We did open at, I called the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. We then went into executive session in which we discussed strategy with respect to litigation position of a public body, and the chair so declares between Chief David Gildemet and Jeffrey Gomes, and approves his strategy going forward. And as it happens, I'm sure it will be in the press, and we'll move forward on that. We then will move back to open session. I will start by reading our required statement that, as required by open meeting law, you are hereby informed that the town will be video and audio taping as well as live broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience who plans to video or audio tape this meeting must notify the chairman prior to the start of the meeting. See no one so inclined, I ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Weekly briefing. Joe, you want to give us an update?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is the construction schedule weekly update submitted December 11th for the 3 weeks look ahead, starting with this week. The 1 week look ahead for December 16th through the 20th. The mainline sewer crew number 1, the subcontractors are working at various locations throughout the project scope. Mainline sewer crew number 2 continues their installation on Route 137, which we all know unfortunately necessitates detours. The week of December 23rd, which is of course Christmas week, there will be no work conducted on December 25th. The remaining days, mainline sewer crew number 1, the subcontractors, continue their work at various locations. Mainline sewer crew number 2 will now commence installation of Ellis Drive and White Pine Circle. And the 3 week look ahead for the week of the new year, December 30th, there'll be no work on New Year's Day. The rest of the week, mainline sewer crew number 1, subcontractors performing at various locations, and mainline sewer crew will return to continue installation work on Route 137, which will necessitate detours. And then quickly, Mr. Chairman, we'll have our monthly construction meeting tomorrow with all interested parties, as we do. And unfortunately, the topic of extended hours will come up again. We haven't reached an appropriate conclusion or appropriate actions on that, so I will be reporting out to the board on extended hours next week.
And just a reminder, the extended hours are for 2, possibly 3 days for the 5 manhole covers you need to put in.
That was the understanding. However, it's come to our attention that they have operated well beyond the contract hours, so we need to address that issue before we get into standard extended hours.
Michael?
I ask that we agenda this and maybe get a little more conversation after the construction meeting.
Yeah.
I did speak to the contractor, and they are a little frustrated. I believe that they can't work past 4 o'clock. So I'm not sure who made the decision to work till 4, but it is seemingly that we're going very slow. And at 20 feet a day, I think we're going to be there a lot longer, and I think a lot more people are frustrated with the detours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since I made one of the complaints, I can assure you I live 1 block away from the southerly detour at Route 39. And if 4 o'clock was the time we were talking about, that would be terrific. They were closing at 7, 7:30, 7:45, so well beyond the time that they'd agreed to.
Well, I'm comfortable putting it on the agenda to have a further discussion. Joel, I would also like at that time to talk about the schedule for Phase 2, Contract 2. When you expect them to, what their schedule is going to be.
Will do.
Okay. Anyone else for public comment?
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I would like to first start by apologizing to anyone who was at the Cultural Center intending to see the light show Due to the weather, we had some difficulty with it. Please know that this has nothing to do with the Doan family. When we moved it from their location to the Cultural Center, clearly there were some things that we did not foresee. Sean Libby and the Highway Department have been great, and we believe that we have everything worked out. Certainly you can call the community center. We'll let you know that the display is up. We're trying to make sure everything's posted. So I apologize profusely. It was intent to frustrate people who tried to go out and see it in the rain, and we do believe we have that fixed.
Okay.
That being said, we'd really, really like to invite you to come out on the 18th and see the show, and we are collecting for the family pantry. It really is a fabulous, sorry that that happened, but on the December 18th, we will be going car to car with some elves and volunteers and collecting canned goods. You can find the list of what the family pantry needs. We have flyers in the back of the room, and the newspaper has been great to help us with that. So just want to remind people from 4:30 to 9 on December 18th. And lastly, I'd just like to take a moment to say thank you to the entire community. As I'm standing here, they're wrapping the last few presents for the Mitten Tree program, where 50 individuals will be having a phenomenal Christmas thanks to all of the support from individuals, Cranberry Festival, the HEA. I could name them all, but you'll see our thank you letter. So thank you very much. It was very successful, and it's always humbling to be the person who gets to collect all the gifts from everyone. So thank you very much.
It's become to be expected of Harwich, isn't it? Richard?
Mr. Chairman, good evening, members of the board, Mr. Powers. Just a reminder, as I said it would for the month of December, your first actual tax bill will be coming out just after Christmas. And our snowbirds, those who travel south for the winter, if you are wishing to challenge your valuation of your property, you have from January 1st to February 1st to do so. There's no time extension. It's required 1 month to challenge your valuation. And again, I will remind everybody, after our previous discussions, the Board of Assessors can do nothing about the taxes being charged for someone. All we are concerned about is the value of your property. Thank you.
Richard, I assume the 1 month is when the letter's stamped, not when they receive it?
Correct. And it's, again, we don't know the exact day it goes out, but it'll go out probably the bill between Christmas and New Year's. Merry Christmas, everybody. And, but we are required by law for the 30 days after it is sent out to have that, and we figure it by February 1st.
Okay.
In other words, you're statutory Scrooges?
That would be the Department of Revenue, Mr. McManus.
Richard, can I ask you just to follow up on the process? If someone wants to do that, they contact the assessor's office and schedule time with you, or they do it in writing, or what's?
No, it is in writing. Thank you. It's an excellent question, Mr. Chairman. The abatement form is actually on the assessor's website. They can download it. They don't need to be here physically to get a copy of it. They can download it, send it into the board. They may request an actual hearing before the Board of Assessors, which is held in executive session, to bring whatever evidence they would like in order to challenge the value of their property. And again, I spoke to the men's breakfast at the community center the other day, and a lot of the gentlemen were there, many, many wonderful questions about that process. I would encourage all taxpayers to get a copy of their field property card, the field card, so to speak. It's online, again, at the assessor's website. You can get a copy of your field card, and you can go over every aspect of your property. Number of bedrooms is correct, number of baths, the size of the property. And again, any of those things can be challenged as they all impact the value of your property.
Okay. Thank you,
Thank you.
Richard. Anyone else for weekly briefing? Comments? Now we'll move then to consent agenda. Steve, you want to?
Mr. Chair,
Excuse me, Don?
before you get into that, if that includes the minutes, or does it? Yes, it does. I was hoping to table the minutes until next week because they were inaccurate, first of all, since I know I voted against the Phase 1
Right.
Contract 1, and it doesn't say that. And number two, I spent a considerable amount of time saying why I did not feel that, and it had a lot to do with the state and the reimbursement.
Right.
Nothing is in here.
Will you give some narrative to correct the minutes for us?
Sure.
And we'll bring that back next week then?
Sure.
Okay,
Okay, well, we'll eliminate the minutes
minutes.
at the request of Dawn. And, uh, for, before you get into that, before you get into the consent agenda, I Then B, vote to accept the resignation of Angelo, and I hope I pronounce this correctly, Kyriakis, from the Harwich Historical Commission, effective 12/6/19.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Any from the audience? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll move then to public presentations, and the first one is application transfer victor license. Joe, you want to start this discussion?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, there's an application for a transfer of the annual common victualler and all alcohol beverage license that is now held by Ham and Brie LLC, doing business as Red's Pizza. As you know, last week, the board processed the renewal application, which was the appropriate step to take first. We have applicant and attorney present. They have endeavored to provide all the materials that are required both locally and by the ABCC. And at this point, Mr. Chairman, I would turn it over to them for a presentation and questions.
Good evening.
May I approach with
You
some
may.
photocopies of our signs for a little taste
Okay.
of what
And-
is to come in your neighborhood?
And Rob, if I may, can I ask you, both of you to identify yourselves? for
Yes,
the-
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There you are. Jill,
One more.
one for you, too.
Okay, no, great, good.
There you go. My name is Robin Reed. I am a mediator and attorney with offices in Provincetown. To my left, Robert Young, also here with us tonight, Michael Scott, and Josh Winston. You should pay particular attention to Michael because he's going to be the manager of record. As Joe said, this is an application to transfer an existing common victualler and annual all alcohol license from the existing licensee, Ham and Brie LLC, to Beachlight LLC. And the three gentlemen here with me this evening are the principals of Beachlight. And the premises are located at 703 Main Street, again, across and a little bit to the right from here. It is now known as Red's. My clients intend to change the name to Seal and Cafe. I'm going to keep my remarks really brief. I'm sure you'd rather have questions for my clients. It's under contract to purchase, and this is the most significant condition for the consummation of the contract, this transfer of the liquor license. And we're seeking your approval this evening so that tomorrow morning this package can wend its way to Boston, where the ABCC will also take a look at my clients. They're proposing to offer in the daytime, largely in the morning, espresso, coffee, baked goods, and smoothies. And then more towards the afternoon and evening, they're going to feature craft beer and wines with a pub-style menu. They intend to operate from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. The petitioners are qualified applicants under the statute. The statute that governs here is Chapter 138, Section 12. All three of my clients have taken the TIPS training. All three have read your Harwich regulations. All have clean criminal records, i.e. no criminal record. We have extensive experience in the hospitality industry. Bob himself has held 2 liquor licenses in the past, one in California and one in Florida. All three are now residents of Harwich, which they're very excited about. And as I mentioned, this is a closing of the transfer of the business, and we would be more than happy if you folks saw fit to approve this transfer if you wish to condition the issuance of the license on confirmation of the closing. Again, I'm not going to spend more time talking. Approve this transfer. Do you
Thank
have
you,
any
Robin.
questions?
Well, let me ask Bob to give us a brief description of what you have planned, and I'll open up for questions.
Basically, what we want to do is, we're calling it the Seal Pub and Cafe, and I had a coffee house in the Russian River area of California for 10 years, and we had an espresso machine and did our own, some baked goods. I don't want to compete with Ruggies or anything like that. We just want to set up a healthy lifestyle, sort of open cafe type thing, type food and beverage operation. The three of us will operate. So we'll be operating on Main Street, living around here, and interacting with everybody.
And what are you going to do in the evening?
The
In bar
evening,
par-
what's up?
In the evening?
The evening will be pub food, the bar will stay in operation. It'll just be the same kind of, we'll have a pub food menu, we'll still offer espresso if you want that late, but we want to do craft beers and good wines and things like that.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Joe, any further comments?
Just that the application was completed. There were 2 outstanding items from the seller. We do have those in hand, so there's nothing to hold up the decision of the board.
Okay. Don, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the police chief is still here. Does he have any objections to this?
Mr. Chairman, I'm certainly willing to take the council's word for it. I inquired today when I saw this on the agenda. I do not recall seeing a packet that I usually see for transfers of this nature to conduct the background checks that we do. I looked into it, and the best recollection of my administrative assistant is a gentleman came in for fingerprints, I believe, is somebody came in for fingerprints, but it wasn't completed. That's where we stand.
So there are query forms in the packet. I can't run those anymore, so,
Okay, well, it's usually sent over from Town Hall, and we get a full packet with all the names. It's going to be the manager or supervisor or whatever, and then those backgrounds are run, and I send a memo to the board.
So
I do not, this could be on me, I'm not 100% sure. I searched my email, I did not see any packets of that nature, and that's the best recollection of my administrative assistant, is that
if
we
we
have.
decide to move, we may do that conditionally then. Don?
Yeah, that's kind of why I brought it up. I don't think it's on you. I don't think it was on Joe. Ann's not here anymore, and she used to pretty much run that as her own area. And I suspected that that's what occurred.
so I'm not sure if this is helpful, but the ABCC will also run those criminal records as well. So I'm sure I can obtain that and share it with you, if you would like.
Yeah, this pretty much had to do with a process we
Okay.
had. We'd get an application, and
Yep.
chief would see it, and he'd run
Yep.
background checks.
Okay, good.
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that if the board takes any action, they do that pending
Condition.
completion of all that. I apologize. It's my understanding that we had tied all that back.
Okay,
That one's on me.
all right. Don, anything else?
No,
Ed?
Just a question, what town on the Russian River?
Guerneville,
Guerneville?
yeah. I'm from California.
So am I.
Oh, really? Oh, good.
We'll try not to hold that against you.
Yeah, don't leave. I still have a house there.
First, Guerneville is now a town that routinely goes underwater.
That's town.
Michael?
Just a formality question, I guess, to Joe. Last week we approved Red's license. Does that have to go back to ABCC for final approval? And will there be any delay in that if so?
No, that application was complete to everything we needed. When the board voted it, they're all being transmitted at the same time. We did speak with ABCC about the transfer, so they directed us to send all renewals in first, and then they'll complete that and then draw their attention to the transfer.
Okay. Anything else, Michael?
No.
Steve?
I just am very excited. I think this is a terrific commitment you folks are making to Howard Center. I see Greg sitting there, who has made a phenomenal commitment to Howard Center, and I know there's a big initiative that is taking place. In fact, we received a letter from Paul Doan recently relative to the whole Howard Center initiative, and to have a business like yours and your willingness to commit to the town, that's very exciting. So I hope you're very successful.
We're excited. Thank you.
Michael?
I move that we approve the transfer of the annual common vicular all alcohol beverage license now held by Ham and Bree LLC, DBA Red's Pizza, 703 Main Street, Harwich, Mass. 02645, to Beach Light LLC, DBA Seal Pub, 703 Main Street, Harwich, Mass. 02645, on the following described premises located at 703 Main Street, Harwich, 02645. Indoor, do I need to read the
No.
description?
Close enough.
Pending the background checks and the packet to the police chief.
Okay.
Successful background.
There-
Successful.
Second.
there a second? Any more discussion? Anyone in the audience care to weigh in? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous, and
Thank
best
you.
of luck.
Yeah,
We'll
welcome.
be looking
Thank
Thank
forward.
you so much.
Welcome.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
I'll call you in the morning.
Thank you so much.
Moving to new business, A is to vote to recommendation of Deb Samantha, Harwich Board of Registrars. Michael?
I move we accept the recommendation of the Harwich Board of Registrars to appoint Deborah Samenta as an assistant registrar.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? I can only weigh in. I'm really pleased that Deb volunteers for anything in town. She's
Very smart.
been involved in a lot of different activities, so thanks to her. If anyone from the audience, if not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No opposed, so Joe unanimous. B is discuss release of sand rights on 9 Holland Ave, and I'd have to provide additional information for this, so maybe Joe, you can, this confused me a little because it's a long time ago it was approved,
Yeah.
so maybe Joe, if you can walk it for me and
I'll certainly try my best, Mr. Chairman. I believe in the signature package should be the material received back from KP Law on the appropriate language on the deed instrument to be recorded. But as you see in the packet, we received this communication from attorney for the property owners. He has provided a certified copy of the town meeting action going back to 1995. Beyond that, my understanding is that the property owners did not avail themselves of that right of that article. However, there's a need for them to move forward on it now. I don't know if Attorney Whittegren is present.
he just walked in, so
Beautiful.
maybe he
So
can help.
maybe if you can give an assist and help me out here with that information. But I will say to the board that we do have the instrument for the board to sign as vetted and confirmed by KP Law on behalf of the town. In other words, it's the town's document
Okay.
that we're providing.
Good evening.
Brian?
Thank you for taking this into consideration tonight. As described,
Brian, can I just interrupt you and ask you to identify yourself? for the record?
sorry, Brian Whittegren, from Harwich, representing Evan and Molly Horniman, who are the owners of 9 Highland Avenue in South Harwich. They purchased the property in November of 1994 and discovered at the time when the title search was done that the town of Harwich reserved the right to remove sand from the property. They were able to get an article in the town meeting, the very following town meeting, May of 1995, Article 54, in which they sought to have the town release those sand rights. As presented, as you heard already, I submitted a certified copy indicating that the article passed unanimously, requiring a 2/3 vote. At this point, so many years later, Mr. and Mrs. Horniman would like to retire, move closer to their kids and grandchildren. So their property was put under a purchase and sale agreement, and discovered, to their surprise, that despite the fact that town meeting had voted to request that the selectmen give up those rights, those sand rights, that there was no follow-through by them or by whoever was representing them at the time to go before the selectmen. Probably would have been a good thing to do right after, in May or June of 2095. It never having been done, and now it's serving as a problem with the title. We would request that you follow through with the commitment from the town meeting of 1995 and execute the document which would release the town's right to remove sand from the property. It would be pretty hard at this point. All the land has been developed, so you have to lift up all the houses probably to get the sand out of there anyway. But it's my understanding that the release was approved by town council. It's been, as I say, vetted and approved by them, so I would ask that the selectmen agree to execute the release, releasing their sand rights.
Michael?
I move that we approve the release of sand rights at 9 Highland Avenue, which approved.
Any discussion from anyone in the audience? Discussion here? thanks for clarifying that, Brian and Joe. I was trying to figure out why we're acting on something that's now, what, 25, almost 25 years old, but
It's hard to believe that an attorney would let something like that slip through the cracks, but, you know.
I can't understand attorneys doing that either.
Well,
I had no comment.
no, it's just that there have been, since the time I've been on the board, a few other items from the 90s that were passed at town meeting but never done officially because, well, what the hell, everybody in town knows we did it, so why do we have to record it?
Right. Doesn't cause a problem until you go to sell the property.
That's right.
Right. There's no, any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much.
We're up to annual meetings. We'll start with the Cemetery Commission.
So unfortunately, Cindy Eldridge was here, but she got called off to a family emergency, so she won't be able to present today. Robin Kelly, Cemetery Administrator. I don't know if you want me to read the entire report that she put in the packet.
Yes, if you can hit some of the high points.
Okay. We currently have 2 commissioners, Cindy Eldridge and Stephen Connors. Karen Young retired from our commission this past year. We would like to thank her for her efforts with us. It was a extremely tough year, as you all know, for us. And so we have 1 vacancy on our committee. We meet every Tuesday at the beginning of the month, the first Tuesday. So if anyone would like to get on the Cemetery Commission, we'd love to have another member. We have completed a whole bunch of stuff, which is in the packet. The only thing that was missing from the upcoming commission plans was the CPC article submitted this year for the Pine Grove Cemetery, which was $75,000. We had gone before the Historic Commission, then they unanimously approved it and went to the CPC, so we're hoping that that passes. Everybody, I'm sure, read the packet. Does anybody have any questions for me?
I have Robin, a question. Following, let me phrase it differently. Moving into this year's town meeting,
Yes.
are you going to resubmit the bylaws that
Yes,
in
we have a
discussions,
couple.
basically with FinCom on making some corrections and modifications to that?
Yeah, we are working on the language on some of the rules and regulations.
And will you vet those? I assume you'll vet those with various
Yes,
people that were concerned on the language?
yes.
Okay. Any other questions for the Cemetery Commission?
Thank you.
Well, thanks for reporting. Cemetery always been great. And you recovered from now I'm talking to myself, but what kind of tree damage did you sustain?
So we lost 425 trees total, and really for the cemeteries. We are putting together a $20,000 tree article for this year's town meeting that I've submitted so far to Joe. We've had a tree article in the past to replant trees in the cemeteries. We haven't used it in years. I think it was 4 years ago that we had it. We got 10,000 to replant trees. We do work with the tree farm in Barnstable County, so we get pretty large-sized trees there for relatively cheap money. But we lost over 200 pond, 80 trees in Mount Pleasant. We lost quite a significant amount in Pine Grove and in Evergreen. Hopefully we'll be getting that stump grinder and we'll be able to plant some more trees. But I think it's imperative that we plant some more trees and replace 400's a lot of trees to lose. And there are still a lot of trees in the cemeteries that still need to be limbed up, that we're still working at cleaning up. So it was a lot of damage.
Okay. Michael?
Just a question, since you brought it up. The perpetual care funds, would that cover tree replacement?
In our perpetual care fund right now, we probably only have about, I think, $3,000 available. You only can spend the interest that's earned in there. You can't spend the principal, so the principal just stays in there. We haven't spent it. It was initially invested not in high-yielding things, so they've now moved stuff around, but I could get the actual total but I did ask that question. I sent an email to Amy and asked her, and Carol verified that there wasn't enough to put for the tree replacement.
Thank you.
But I can get that exact total for you and send it to you if you'd like.
Thank you, Robin. Any other questions from the audience? If not, thank you very much for the report, and
Thanks.
good job. Next annual report is the golf committee, and they are ably represented here. Ably. Okay. Does this work for you guys?
Sure, sure.
Perfect. Okay, Clem Smith, Chair of the Harwich Golf Committee, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to everyone. I know you got everything in the packet, and I'll try to highlight, a few of the things that we've tried to emphasize and would like to see reflected in the record. I thought this was really important. In FY19, this shows you basically the membership breakdown. Obviously, Harwich is the dominant component of the membership profile. But another thing I think that's a tribute to Roman and the operation in general is the retention of members that we've had over time is just pretty impressive, especially if you look at golf as a marketplace in the municipal world. Different towns have had a variety of issues that they can't brag as much as we can as far as retention of members is concerned. So that's been positive for us. And in the next slide, as far as matching expenses and revenues, this is a key to success within the town, and I think the facts speak for themselves. And sensitive to the request of the town administrator and the selectmen in general, we've tried to minimize expenses and in fact have reduced them somewhat, and in keeping with your incentive for us. As far as the committee is concerned, committee participation has been effectively strong. Basically, our seven-member committee is comprised of Martha Duffy, she's the vice chair, Steve Bellata, Tom Johnson, John Crook, John Wheeler, Jack Conley, and these gentlemen, thanks to the vetting of the selectmen, have provided, I think, a very strong business component to the membership of the committee. And in collaboration with Roman and Sean Fernandez, I think it gives it a marked business identity. So when you get to major initiatives that have been continuing over the last few years, this is the big enchilada, so to speak. A recent photo of the cart barn is completed, I think, is evidence of everybody's hard work that's come to light. These are some of my favorite pictures. They might be hard to interpret, but when you look at the actual site and the issues that were surrounded its excavation, incorporated into the construction was a massive challenge as far as the foundation work was concerned. And as far as the finished product's concerned, it's going to be a tremendous asset as far as going forward, especially when we go solar electric with our cart fleet. This project, which morphed into even more than we ever envisioned, was basically designed around the roof footprint, if you can see that in the foreground immediately, provided 30 kilowatts of power to the grid, et cetera. But the outstanding thing is, in collaboration with CVEC and Leo Kakunis, now is a friend of Harwich, of course, and resident, we've been able to expand the entire project, and this will produce 290 kilowatts of energy as a supplemental to the golf operation. So along with the introduction of, you know, the electric fleet soon to come, unfortunately about a year in the foreground, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The devastation as far as trees were concerned was extraordinary. And I'm going to round it up to 200-plus trees lost in substantial areas in the market. On the other hand, as part of our ongoing project, you can see to the left, these are trees adjacent to actually the 16th hole. And you know, to the non-golfer, et cetera, you might say, well, you know, what's the big deal with these? In consultation with the USGA, they have recommended their removal. The enhancement is better turf quality, better conditions, you know, hole to hole. And the fringe benefit that was so dramatic, with all the trees lost because of our aggressive work in pursuing this, trees on the golf course as far as damage to greens and tees, which were the big items as far as the tornado were concerned, it was very, very minimal. It was actually, what, Roman, one tree?
One tree and one tee.
One tree and one tee. And all those hundreds of trees, they fell the right way. So that was a plus. So as far as cart path renewal and improvements are concerned, this master plan, which we pursued several years ago, we've incrementally put in place as we've gone along. And the reaction from the golfing public's been very positive. It's been a nice enhancement. As far as the clubhouse is concerned, we've continued to incorporate restaurant upgrades there. And the nice thing is, and I don't think, you know, because you people are busy, the selectmen wouldn't realize that basically our goal is after 5 years, regardless of who the vendor is in that facility, we'll have a turnkey operation because we've reinvested money in it. So it ensures a continuity to that aspect of the whole program. Continuing with our USGA consulting, it's been enormously helpful to our operations. It's kind of a critique from the experts. They come in every other year. And in this picture, to the uninitiated, it wouldn't mean too much, but basically you're looking across the 6th hole to the 5th fairway. And all the tree removal that's gone into this area has just contributed to better, again, turf conditions, enhance the playability of the course. As far as future projects are concerned, with capital outlays endorsement, we have a robust plan in place that, you know, continues to everybody's benefit. And I know the print's really small, but it's kind of exciting. It's a segue into discussion about junior golf. We plan to actually incorporate... Clem, could you possibly go back and,
Yeah.
and just read to us what you've highlighted in yellow, since those seem to be the critical
Okay.
factors, if you can?
Yeah, thanks, Ron.
So we don't lose everyone.
Yeah.
So what's current is the tree work on the front 9, completion of a 6-year project, that's for FY '21, and as well car path work on hole number 10, and it's for FY '21. Third future project in FY '21 is the design and feasibility of a 3-hole practice and putting course. Further down, the reason these were highlighted is when they were submitted, they were additions to the capital plan, is a maintenance truck, an F-350 in FY '23.
Okay. Thank you, Ron.
And I think the key there is the fact that these capital projects and improvements will be paid for out of golf-specific funding, you know, through our reserve fund mechanisms, and that won't, you know, impinge on the taxpayers. And especially with regards to the junior golf, as we go forward, a couple of exciting things have taken place in the last year or so. Drive, chip, and putt, which is a national competition, has put
Cranberry Valley in a serious way on the golf map, as well as the First Tee initiative. And you might not be familiar with that particular organization, but I brought in a recent publication. It's Mass Golfer, and there's a great article if you get a chance to see it. Not everybody's a golfer, but there are about 30,000 young people involved in this program. It not only promotes golf, but it promotes the ethics, the morality that stands behind the game. It's an extraordinary team effort in conjunction with the PGA, and this is entitled Seventh Heaven, and the article references none other than Cranberry Valley, named as the seventh lead geographic area to be recognized, by this group. And there's one in Boston. I mean, geographically, they're spread out. And our designation basically is to service the Lower Cape. Hyannis is designated to service the Upper Cape. So it's been a tremendous initiative. And it's all done in conjunction with, and they even reference it in here, with the Monomoy schools, both the middle school and the high school as well. So that, I think, covers everything in a nutshell. So if there are any questions. For questions, Steve?
Yep.
Yeah. No, I'm familiar with the First Tee program. It's a phenomenal,
Yeah.
across the country.
Exactly.
Just a wonderful.
And to be in
program.
that kind of steering situation that we are is
Yeah.
just,
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a good honor.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it promotes, of course, our result of attracting golfers, which we continue to do, so. Yeah. Michael?
Just a
Anyone else?
great job with the golf course. Can you just give us an update on what's going on with the cable, the new power cable that's supposed to come in off of Oak Street? We haven't had a report on that in a long time.
The challenge, Mike, and I'm glad you brought it up, with Eversource has been a challenging experience. And basically, as you're well aware of, they came to us, and Roman can fill in if I miss anything, but they wanted about a $250,000 upgrade, to encompass the entire facility. It's been negotiated down to the point where the solar provider, Green Skies, who has obligated themselves, they're going to pick up the last $50,000 as far as incorporating that three-phase power, up past, Sean's terminal where it stops right now and into the barn. And if you want to expound on that, Ron?
The work is July
Yeah.
by Green Skies.
So you said that they're gonna pick up the last 50,000. Who's paying the first 200, or did we get rid of the first 200?
Well, what they,
Eversource backed off on their requirement to upgrade our facility.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
they only required a $50,000 new transformer, and absorbed in the CVAC contract by the vendor.
yeah,
Thank
okay. And good question and good news.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It is good news.
that was,
That was our roadblock.
that was tough.
Okay.
But,
Ed? Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You guys run, Roman and Sean run a first-class operation. I appreciate all your efforts and the efforts of the golf committee.
oh, in fact, Don, you made me think of this. Roman's too modest to mention it, but he's been designated as the Cape Cod Section Pro of the Year for his contributions to junior golf and his excellence in it as far as management's concerned with the golf operation. So,
Excellent.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Of course, I
it's a
see
good
no
segue
problem.
to rates and fees.
Yeah. We'll, thank you all. We're a good asset to town. We'll move on the agenda then to the fee discussion.
Great. So, you'll see on the memo that I forwarded into the packet. By the way, my name is Roman Greer. I'm the Director of Golf for the town of Harwich, and I'm presenting the rate and fee recommendation for 2020 at Cranberry Valley. You'll see that we held the golf committee held a public hearing for rates and fees on November 12th, where I presented recommendations, and the golf committee chose to unanimously endorse them. The recommendations are pretty simple for this year. It's to increase all adult membership categories by $20, and to capture that $20 in the Golf Improvement Fund to fund the capital projects that were just listed. That would fund them entirely by the golf operation. We also wanted to consider an additional $25 to Chatham memberships. This has always been a discussion this time of year, and the golf committee and I decided that maybe it'd be appropriate time to create some separation. And then lastly, create a new collegiate category for memberships. The rationale was when we did a competitive analysis of the golf market, we really felt Cranberry Valley was well placed in the market. We have among the highest greens fees, which is justified by our the demand to play the golf course and how popular it is. And we have among the lowest membership fees, which is also appropriate because we have the fewest amount of golf holes among our competition. So our members fight harder for tee times. And then finally, financially, as you saw in the charts, golf once again hit a high water mark in revenues for the second year in a row in FY19. So the next slide showed a competitive analysis. It just shows a 66% of Harwich members and 16% Chatham. You also include in those categories the junior and young adult, because those are all Harwich and Chatham residents as well. So our golf course for membership is over 90% Harwich and Chatham. And then finally, the last page is the what the full rate sheet looks like with the proposed changes. Do you have any questions?
Steve, and then
So the additional 20 for Chatham residents is another 25 on top of that?
Yes, so it'd be 45 for Chatham residents, yes.
okay.
And again, we'll invite your feedback. This has always been it's been a topic for a number of years.
Yeah, a long time, but
I think it's
of course we initially went this way because the membership was dropping, so we're trying to encourage more members.
It's been robust, especially from Chatham. That's our largest segment of growth.
Michael?
From your November 12th meeting on golf fees, what was the feedback from the golfers?
We had one member of the public show up, and he endorsed the, I think it was, he endorsed the idea of raising the Chatham membership. But there was only one member showed up.
Shocking.
And Mike, it might not be appropriate to generalize, but Chatham members that I encountered, I mean, literally volunteered. Hey, we do not mind spending a few extra dollars because we recognize the value of the product offered here. And, you know, I'd say that was a sentiment that's pretty honest.
I agree. There was 4 years ago, I believe, when we had the same conversation.
Right.
The recommendation at the time was not to change and differentiate between the two towns because of the past agreement, and you thought that we would lose some golfers, and the membership was on a decline, I believe, at that time, prior to you, Roman.
Yes, I think it was stagnant at best, and there was a desire to initiate some new memberships. So, and that's worked.
Ed?
Nope.
Don? Nope. Michael?
I would move that we approve the golf fee increase as presented, or golf fees as presented.
A second?
second.
Any discussion from the audience? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Pass unanimous, and again, great job.
Great job,
Thank
guys.
you.
Gentlemen,
Thank you very
thank
much.
Personally, with my golf game, I have no problem with
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks.
Okay, moving next to the agenda, Joel, the next items I think are all yours. All the license renewals.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You'll see in your packet material the list of the renewals that have been vetted by staff and are now eligible for renewal. The first we have are the auto license renewals, the annual auto license renewals for the various classes that we have as listed in the packet.
Michael?
I move that we approve the annual auto renewals 2020 as listed in the packet.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? The audience? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. We'll move next, Joel, to the liquor license.
Thank you,
adult-
Mr.
excuse me,
Chairman.
entertainment license.
Yeah, similar statement that the list of common victual license renewals that you see listed in the packet have, applications have been submitted, everything's in good order and has been vetted by staff.
Mr. Chair?
Don?
so I could get the word into the record correctly. I move that we, the common Vittler's license renewals 2020 is listed in the packet.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Well, Joe, you can take your pick on who
can
seconded
have it.
that. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next then is the liquor license.
Entertainment.
That miss, excuse me, entertainment.
So, Mr. Chairman, that list of entertainment license renewals, annual licenses is in the packet, and staff made sure to indicate the hours of operation that have been previously approved by the board. And these have been vetted and are ready for the board's action.
Is there a second or a motion?
I move that we approve the annual entertainment license renewals for 2020 as listed in the packet.
With the restrictions previously on them.
With the restrictions listed on the licenses. And I
Second.
appreciate that, Joe, because that was one of my questions going into this, did we have the hours listed? Any discussion from anyone? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, now we're into liquor.
Mr. Chairman, as you'll see from the list, mercifully, it's getting smaller and smaller. These are liquor license renewals, annual renewals for 2020, where all of the required documentation was presented to staff and vetted, and is ready for the board's action.
Michael?
I move that we approve the annual liquor license renewals for 2020 as listed in the packet.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Anyone from the audience? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. And then we have annual and seasonal lodging house.
Okay, lastly, Mr. Chairman, we have the annual and seasonals relative to lodging and inn holders, as have been submitted to staff, vetted, and ready for action.
Michael?
I move that we approve the annual and seasonal lodging, house, and inn holders license renewals for 2020 as listed in the packet.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Anyone in the audience? All, we'll move then, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Say- Opposed? Unanimous, and we'll move on then. Joe, you and Danelle, good job pulling all this together.
Thank you. And I'll pass that along to staff. They did some great work on this.
Next on the agenda is the West Harwich DCPC Board of Selectmen Liaison Selection. This was brought up last week by Elaine of this committee. Don's been extremely active on this and carried roll on this. I'd actually suggested, but I'll leave it to the board, that maybe it'd be good to have a second person on this. But there's pluses and minuses to that. It brings broader, possibly broader, but Don's our expert, so I'll see if anyone wants to jump into this. Don, you want to comment since I try to throw you under the bus?
Well, it's not, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's not so much under the bus because I'm pretty happy. We're up the Barnstable County Commissioners, and now that the ordinance is passed,
That hard work, yeah.
it's not going back there. So anybody who does this, the path is pretty clear, and I mean, I'm pretty satisfied that it's going in the right direction. I mean, Stephen's going to one of the meetings with me, wingman actually, right behind me. If he'd like to do it, I'd be supportful.
If I could,
No.
I did have a discussion with Larry, and I need to give it a little bit of thought. I've been also talking with the people on the Howard Center Initiative, and but I first would like to commend you for all the work you did on this. You know, as much as there was a big community effort, no question about that, it took a few good people in the mix to kind of make sure it got to where it needed to be, and you certainly were integral to that, Don, so thanks.
I thank you for that.
I move that we appoint Don Howe as the liaison to the West Harwich DCPC for the Board of Selectmen.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'm in favor of that, because I don't want to postpone this discussion. If you're uncomfortable
okay.
with it, we'll go ahead and move ahead. Don, you have
Would have been happy to, I'm still okay with adding Stephen too, if that becomes appropriate. I think it's good to have the backup, I really do.
Do we want to appoint two?
This is point two. we can do that,
Or do you, I mean, we can all attend the meetings.
yeah.
Yeah, then you don't have to worry about having to be at everything.
Michael, why don't you
Thanks, Larry.
modify your
Well,
motion?
I don't know as if I have to, and I don't want to put Stephen on the spot, because I think that I read the same article for Howard Center initially.
Yeah, and I
certainly
just,
would put
I-
you
I-
into that, but.
We can wait. I'm
Yeah,
just
let-
saying that I would
if-
be
if-
happy to have the help.
If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to wait.
Sure.
Okay,
So I'll leave my motion as.
okay. We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And then we have discussion staffing needs. Joe, you want to, I can briefly comment that I've told every group I get in front of that we're in a transition phase right now, but we're in good shape. We have strong staff, fantastic department heads, and so we can move cautiously and do our job right while we do the town administrator's position. In saying that, in the short term, we need help. There's 3 broad categories that we need help on. One is procurement. We're walking through a list, and Joel and Griffin and Carol primarily, and the department heads are working. I know Joe again and gang have been working on defining what open positions we have. There's some positions we need to understand better and be sure they fall within our position descriptions. And then also so we should look at the personnel needs. And third item that I feel we need help on is preparation for town meeting. There's a lot of work going to getting the warrant articles put together correctly. I think there's a lot here that we possibly didn't do as well as we could have last year in preparation for town meeting. That we not only the budget issues and those reviews, but that we adequately discuss among ourselves which items we want to go forward on, but then also have public interaction on what we're going forward on. So there's as much as possible going into town meeting. Those are 3 broad categories, and Joe, I'll try to set the stage, but that's, if you want to comment as well.
Well, no, Mr. Chairman, I think it was very well said. You know, as a person who's grounded in personnel matters, as you'll see in my memo, the allotment of 4.0 full-time equivalents in administration, and we're operating at 2.5 full-time equivalents. So that's 2 full-time staffers and a temporary part-timer, less than 19 hours. That's a condition that previous administrator worked under a year ago, and I know Chris made it clear that if he had it to do over again, I think he would seek additional help. So I'm building off of that and telling the board that we're understaffed and we need help going forward in the short term to get through the logjam that's been there on those matters, but also to ramp up for town meeting. Now, in between all of this, Finance Director and I have met with every major department except for one on budgets over the last 2.5 weeks. We've met several times on capital outlay, so we're still getting everything done that needs to get done for town meeting going forward, but it's only going to get busier. So I respectfully have this request before you and the board, Mr. Chairman.
Following that discussion, I would like to take the initiative and recommend that we consider hiring Bob Lawton on a short-term basis to help out. And I'm not 100% sure he will take our offer. I've talked to him early on. I think I've talked to all the several others as well. But he would come in with the most recent knowledge of the operation of Harwich, and that he's worked on personnel issues, and he's has experience in procurement and in putting together town warrants. And as a part-time help, I think he would offer some immediate staffing to get us over the hump. That's where I'm going with it. But Michael?
I got a slightly different idea. We keep going back to Bob Lawton, and I have a great deal of respect for Bob Lawton, and I've said it over and over and over again at this table. But we continue to go back, and you know, I could point out the 40 list, 40 things on a list that Joe brought before us, as well as several positions that haven't been filled. And Bob Lawton was part of that, us falling behind.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming Bob Lawton in any way, but we fell way behind. I don't think we need another retired town administrator to get us through a hump. So I guess I have one financial question. Where are we gonna find the money? That's number one. So have we talked to Carol? Is there a line item? Because the town administrator, past town administrator is being paid. So where is this money gonna come from? And I would much rather see us go out to maybe another town, Brewster, Yarmouth, and talk to their procurement people, which they have, I believe, procurement teams, and see if we could put together a memorandum of understanding and get a contract with another town to borrow some of their staff, worker bees, to get people to come in and work, and people that want to come in and work. And Larry, if I'm not mistaken, I believe one of the full-time positions is going to be coming available fairly soon.
Right.
And I don't know why, because if we know that position's coming available, why we can't start advertising for that position now rather than wait until that person is gone. But I think the hole is a lot deeper than any of us want to believe. I think that there's department heads that have been waiting for employees and waiting for some things for a long time. And I don't see that bringing in a retired town administrator that was the administrator, not the procurement person, is going to help this town at all.
Yes, a couple questions. Joe, we did discuss the funding for this. Possibly you could answer that question.
Yeah, I know that the finance director had spoken with the finance committee chairman a few weeks back about that topic. Their finance committee is expecting submittal of a request for a reserve fund transfer to cover whatever costs we have to cover in the short term. I know that obviously the personnel request has a cost item to it. I know the next agenda item is going to have a cost item to it. But these are costs that have to be borne if those processes are going to go forward.
Okay. Michael?
And I guess that's part of it, Larry. I'd like to see maybe a little bit more of a plan than this. I don't want to delay this because I think we're about a year behind in doing this. But I'd like to see a little bit more of a plan put together, and then other than your thought of Bob Lawton, Charlie Sumner's out there.
He is.
There's a bunch of other retired people now on Cape Cod. If we want to go that route, shouldn't the board interview based on our specific problem and see who's the best for the job?
Yeah. And I'm okay with that. I've contacted, I guess, 4 people, the usual suspects, if I can say it that way, of interest. I have no problem delaying it a week. I would like to not hold it off too long. I know I had attended a departmental meeting, 2 weeks ago, and that was really one of the biggest concerns from staff was getting additional help for on these to move ahead. But thank you, Michael. I'll ask others to weigh in. Don, you want?
Yeah, actually, mine's just tangential because you brought up the name Charlie Sumner. I have the utmost respect for him, but it's a one-way door. He already works through Weston and Sampson as a consultant. From what I'm able to discern from the legal people, he can do this, but he can't go back then. And we may want to verify that before we go too far down that road at all.
Ed?
I think it's clear that we need help in the administrative office, both at administrator level and at a support staff level. But that being said, if we make that decision, then if we're going to bring on an assistant town administrator, it's the acting town administrator's job to pick that. I mean, we get to do a final vote on it, but the charter's fairly clear that if that's what we're hiring, then it's acting town administrator to make that selection
Yeah,
or recommendation to us.
okay. Steve?
Well, perhaps even a little bit more expansive on that. I would view it that in order to utilize the individual correctly, we look to the acting town administrator to make sure that happens. So, you know, those things that we think need to be covered in this short window, and I don't really disagree with Michael either that, you know, a lot more thought needs to go into this. The problem is we're kind of caught in a time bind, as you said. You know, an interim solution appears to need to be put in place pretty quickly, at least from my discussions with Joe and with you and others. And I think we should be able to rely on our acting town administrator to make sure that if we give him resources, he'll be able to utilize them in a way that's effective, that'll address the issues that we have before us, at least in this, you know, as we approach town meeting, which everyone knows we need to be far more prepared than we were last year. So.
Yeah, I mean, good points. I don't necessarily see having interim help as being cross purposes with filling the position, Michael, as you talked about going forward. This is, I'm looking at something to give us immediate help to organize it. I have, you raise a good point. If we were to go out and try to piecemeal this together, you know, look for someone's procurement knowledge and someone with personnel, and that becomes a management nightmare for staff that's, you know, sort of needs help right now to try to put this together. I'm not sure, possibly the way to do is to work with Joe and come back with his recommendation going next week, and then we can go further. But Ed, you had another comment, now I'll go to you, Michael.
Yeah, you know, and the issue of being able to do this quickly, you know, contracting with another town to use their and you know, it may happen quickly, but then again, we may be sitting here at a meeting at the end of February, finally passing on the proper form of the contract.
Okay, Michael, you had another comment, or?
Yeah, just to absorb what Ed just said. I guess I would ask Joe, is it a reasonable idea to look at another town and ask another town administrator professionally if they had extra help in those areas? And to Ed's point, as far as contracts go, I believe he's the one that doesn't want to read through all the contracts and doesn't seem to matter if they're in the packet. A memorandum of understanding is a one-page document, and we would be looking to other towns, and I believe golf department uses memorandums of understandings for different work on golf courses. I think DPW at times uses other towns. Link shaking his head up and down, so I think I'm correct. Is it reasonable to make that phone call before we decide to hire another town administrator, assistant town administrator, I guess? And then to Don's point, Charlie Sumner doesn't work for us. He works for Weston and Sampson as an employee, and if he wasn't doing procurement pertaining to wastewater, and he was helping us fill positions, and if he was helping us with the other procurement, which there's an extensive list of that doesn't pertain to East Harwich or wastewater, how could that not be legal?
It's, from what I understand, it has to do with state ethics, that you can go one way, you can get hired in, and that wouldn't preclude him from working with anything. But he can't go back to dealing with the town after he's worked for the town.
I must admit, I explored that just briefly with Charlie. He wasn't aware of that either at the time, but we could explore that.
Attorney General's office is a good resource.
Yeah, I'll take that. Let me just, my proposal then, Joe, well, my proposal at this point would be to, Joe, we can explore some of this. I'd like to bring it back next week and make a decision. I don't want to wait any longer than that, because we need, we're getting ready for, then we get into the Christmas holidays. I don't want to postpone this decision. So, Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I look at the full portion of this glass for a moment, because we got the other position, and I think that's dead on. There's nothing stopping us from recruiting so we can fulfill our union obligation to put it out for the administrative assistant position that will
Yeah, we
likely
can-
show up in the middle of January.
We'll look at that. That's a good point. Bill and I
It
will-
takes time for that to,
That takes time as well.
yeah.
Joe, you okay with that if we,
I have some thoughts I'd like to share, if I may, Mr. Chairman. First, I know, Michael, I think where you're getting to are the intermunicipal agreements. And it's something we can look into. My only concern is we're talking about, trying to clear out a logjam, but also preparing for annual town meeting, and each one of those communities is gonna be in that same space. So I can certainly vet that. I'm not particularly optimistic that they'll be able to participate in an IMA. It's gonna be beneficial for all parties, given that we'd be drawing upon hopefully the best and the brightest that they have, who would be probably inclined to be working for their towns on their town meeting. I would like to be clear. I had an opportunity to work with Bob while I was brought on and left. It was a brief period of time. I knew him a little bit before I worked with him. I've gotten to know him since then. I personally have no issues with Bob serving in an assistant role because he understands the needs that to fill on personnel and procurement. I think we would work well together, and I think he's someone that I could manage, and he could manage in the situation. I'm willing to defer to the board to investigate all those options, but I also want to be clear regarding all staffing issues. The expected vacancy, my plan on that was that I wouldn't take any action prior to the holidays because I don't want it to get lost in the mix, but the hiring for that role will begin in earnest January 2nd, with the expectation and with a potential start date of the first full week when that is vacant. Even if we did that, however, we're still at 3. We're still behind the 8 ball. And when I talk about administrative help, I was also considering reaching out to our collective bargaining unions to see if there couldn't be an internal transfer for a period of time. So I wasn't even thinking about necessarily going out to the marketplace because of the time that requires. And then lastly, I just want to advise the board, I was going to do it under the TA reports, but I did release a memo to all department heads last week on a hiring process going forward with the express intention of clearing out the log jam. I've worked with 2 department heads so far. I think that'll move very expeditiously. I've heard from 2 other department heads who weren't planning on starting that process, but now that there's a plan in place, they're going to move forward on that, again, after we get through the holidays. So we are making progress. This is more an attempt to, in the short term, continue on with that progress as we ramp up the town meeting process. So I have no concerns with the names that were mentioned. I have no issue pursuing the IMA. I'm just mindful that we're running out of time to get help in a meaningful way.
I'm okay with you exploring this, but I do want us to make a decision next week. Okay, Michael?
And I will just make it clear, I don't want to be the guy that delays this.
Yeah.
If Joe's made his decision, I mean, as Stephen mentioned, Stephen's talked to Joe.
Right.
You've talked to Joe.
Right.
I have not talked to Joe. I imagine Ed's talked to Joe.
Nope.
If this decision's been made and there's 3 votes on the board, I would say somebody on the board should make a motion. If that's what I'm hearing from Joe, is he doesn't want to
Right.
delay this, and you don't think my ideas are gonna work, my ideas are on the table. If we don't wanna go that route, then if the votes are there, make a vote. I don't wanna delay it.
If I can, Mr. Chairman, I want to make it abundantly clear. I'm not vote hunting, and I never have and I never will. I've had conversations with any member of the board that has come in to speak with me. This has been in the packet for 2 meetings now. I'm not going to be shy about making the request. It is a fundamental flaw in the structure that we have in the administration department. And whether it's me as the acting town administrator or the soon-to-be hired administrator, it is not going to end well for the town if we don't have proper staffing to get out of the hole we're in. And beyond that, work more expeditiously and effectively to have a better town meeting. And that's a message that I've been conveying to the department heads. I'll convey it again tomorrow. It's not just about getting out of the logjam. It's making sure we prepare for a better executed town meeting so that we don't repeat what we went through this past spring.
Let me be clear. I've talked to several names about their interest. They've shown interest. I haven't followed up to find out because we haven't taken any action as a board to see whether interest is different than saying, yeah, I want to come work a couple days a week. So I would need some motion to carry that discussion to the next stage. Michael?
You're right.
Well, I'd like to, now that we're all making things clear,
Yeah.
I didn't say vote
Did we
hunting
confirm?
at
Yeah,
all.
what?
I didn't say vote hunting.
We don't.
Joe said
Oh,
vote
no,
hunting.
no,
I
yeah.
said, based on what Joe said
Yeah.
about his relationship with Bob Lawton and experiences with
Wayne
Bob
left and
Lawton.
Rennie left.
Based on your comment, based on Ed's comment about charter, I'm saying that if you think we need to go forward with this tonight, it sounds to me like there's enough votes to go forward
Yeah.
with it tonight. There's
Yeah.
never a vote hunting.
No,
by-
That's okay.
If I
Thank
could
you
though,
for
and Michael, I don't disagree with your pointing out that we need serious structural change in a number of things. And we'll get to that next discussion about the administrator as well. So, point taken, believe me, I'm just a little worried about the short term, that's all.
I am as well. Thank you, Steve.
Let me do this and work with Joe and just find out, in fact, whether Bob is interested. I mean, I know he's interested, but he would do it. And we can explore a couple, we'll bring it back next week for a vote. Okay? 1 week won't hurt us, we'll have to get going.
And
Michael?
if I could just ask that when we
Please.
bring this back, if we could please get a dollar amount attached to it, and Carol's blessing that they found that money.
Sure.
And that we're moving in the
Yeah.
right direction.
We'll absolutely do that. Michael, the reason I didn't do that yet is we haven't had a discussion on, are we talking a couple days a week? Try to define it a little more, so we need to bring that back here. Ed?
And in all likelihood, whether you went out and whether we were able to hire somebody tomorrow or a week from tomorrow, at this time of year, probably nobody's going to want to start until after the first, the Tuesday after or the 2nd of January, so.
Okay, we'll move on. Is the discussion on town administrative search process. I put together, and Joe have it, didn't get it in the packet, a couple things. One was just a timeline of, and I'll get that circulated to you, just so we have some idea of what I think the steps are going forward, committee and so on. I know, Steve, you've been working on trying to gather information, as has Joe, on salary information. And
If I could, just a brief overview on the salary side of things. It is across the Commonwealth, it is across the board. The Mass Municipal Association shows a average salary across the Commonwealth of $114,000. On the Cape, it's significantly more than that. There are none less than 100, and most are in the mid, 150 and above.
yeah, I think when I looked at Brewster, there was like 156.
Yeah.
Is this all administrators
But then
or
I don't,
managers?
but I don't know the details of what went along with that.
Manager,
And
administrator?
of course, you have special,
That's administrator in Brewster.
you have special instances like Provincetown,
Right.
who has,
High
a
cost.
certain different approach to it. Bourne is come in, over 160. And it really, the thing you learn real quickly is it's focused solely on the need of the town and what the demand is on that individual position. It also is focused on sort of where you are with salaries within your own town, department heads, et cetera, and which sort of sets the bar at the lowest level that you're going to be at, and then going up from there. So work to do around this, I think, but it's also, as Michael and I were discussing earlier, it's what's the description? What is it that we're asking this individual to do? So that's very important as well. That'll drive sort of where we're gonna come down in this as well, so.
And I've started to draft, at least generally what we want from a town administrator going forward, 'cause I know Michael said, you know, but it's a good point, we should have a good discussion on that. About 2/3 through, which I'll bring that as a draft to, you know, at least help the discussion.
Yeah.
So we'll bring that back as we gain. I've done some work on what other towns have done. Just to, go ahead, Steve.
I would ask if it is our intention to hire a firm to assist us with this. You know, I'd like to know that, and secondarily, to give us all a chance, and you all have had a chance in the past, I guess, to have interviewed search firms, or be familiar with these search firms that are sort of the names that are out there. There's like 4 or 5 that everybody seems to use.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'd be interested in, you know, where do we start and how quickly can we get that going, if we're going to utilize one.
I did just a brief look at what the neighboring towns recently have Brewster Moore have hired on their search firms. So we'll see. And I do need to make a comment on this because I think I need to do that. And Joel's starting off in a great way. And I'm sure he's interested in the position, but we do want to, I know Joel and we've talked about this. It has to be an open process going forward. And I just want to make that clear to everyone as we have this discussion, because it would not be fair to stack the deck without having a good, a good search for a town administrator. Don, while I'm looking at you, we talked about the makeup of a search committee.
Can we back up just a second to what you just said?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so you know you have cover here, the charter actually requires that the selectmen advertise and do a search. Even if our inclination was to go in that direction, we'd still be required to do it.
Right.
So it's more than just an opinion. We are definitely going to do this to recruit.
It just, we have to be fair.
Yeah.
Makeup of a search committee, I think, Don, you at this point last week. Joel's making it now. Yeah, we should keep it small. 5-member, I think, makes sense for, and I like your suggestion. Maybe we all appoint one. I know I've already had people express interest to me, want to be on the search committee, and then we can bring it amongst us all and decide on the search committee. If that makes sense. You know, this is going to be an ongoing, almost a agenda item every week now is going forward. I'm moving ahead on this, and so I don't expect answering questions tonight, but just we're trying to get the data. Don?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for everybody's edification, because I probably had the most recent experience with the recruitment with the county administrator, and was on that search committee. And it came to my attention, especially after I talked to a couple of the commissioners. Charlie and I were kind of driving the bus on that process, and our objective was to deliver a range of people with different skills and maybe different strengths, so that the commissioners could hire that executive director. But the search firm apparently kind of pre-edited a number of them, so we never even got a chance to see them. And that kind of concerned, I guess is a good word, the commissioners that I talked to, because they did, you and I, every one of us has had the experience of reading a resume where the person built a nuclear reactor with spare auto parts in their basement, because they tend to exaggerate in writing. And ultimately, if you get somebody who's self-effacing, you could wind up having them just get rejected before they ever got talked to. So somewhere along the line, I'd hope that we could all consider how we can make sure that that doesn't happen, that we don't wind up editing out somebody who might be terrific in person, but not so good in writing.
It's interesting you raise that issue. I talked to one of the members of our search committee when we hired last time, and that was one of the points that brought up, is that the search committee pre-screened the candidates, and so they didn't get all the candidates that listed, and it was an irritant. They wanted to be sure, to your point, that we didn't make that.
For what it's worth.
that was seen as a mistake that we don't repeat. The other thing I found in one of the towns I looked at is that, and I know we have budget constraints, but they did assign one of the, actually town staff members, a clerk of the committee. And so we had someone, you know, aiding and putting together committee. Now, whether if we hire a search committee, I'm sure they do that, so we don't need it, but
Search firm.
search firm, yeah, rather.
Yeah, they do that.
I guess my request is that we have items we're trying to get answers for. I know we have some specifics, but let's each of us do our, and Joe as well is helping us out. Let's gather all the information we can. Michael?
If we could, just as a suggestion, each board member maybe send to the chair their ideas of what they're looking for in a town administrator.
Yeah.
If we could also get for our packet the past advertisement for a town administrator, the past one that we ran, and the current job, or the last job description that we put in for a TA, and then maybe, Stephen, as you're doing your research, ask other towns for
I've
that.
tried to gather a bunch already of their descriptions of what they're looking for and
Yeah.
The qualifications.
Okay.
And then I want to thank Stephen for his work already and continue to work on this.
Appreciate it.
Good. If not, we'll, as I say, this will be Ed.
Yeah, I guess, and I mentioned this to Joe when, after he became acting head, is acting town administrator. One of the things as we went forward in looking to hire somebody, I wanted to be sensitive. A lot of times, towns or organizations boost up the second in command to be the acting. It tends to put a damper on who applies for feeling there may be a favored candidate, and I just wanted to make sure that that we didn't get into that situation, and that you know, so if when the decision is made, everybody is completely accepting that it's the five of us, our conclusion on what's the best for the town.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Good point. Good point, Ed. We'll continue on then. Next is contracts.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd defer to our Director of Highway and Public Works. Solid waste. However, I do think our director has come up with a pretty ingenious interim step as to how we can handle solid waste in the short term and what we might have available as a more viable option in the hopefully near future.
Link?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe it was in September, you had Mike Cremara, president of ABC New Bedford / New Bedford Waste, gave you a presentation. And during that presentation, in a PowerPoint presentation he did, he quantified the solid waste crisis that's going on in Massachusetts currently. That is, disposal capacity in the last 8 months has contracted significantly. The first inkling we got of this was back in May when Cavanta closed down. That's the CMAS plant in Rochester, along with another plant that they own in the state in Saugus, and it put a real hurting on everyone. So Mike Camara, the president of ABC, has initially sent out a letter to the towns, and about half the Cape towns signed with him, about half of them stayed with CMAS back 6 years ago now. Mike sent out a letter saying that he wanted to exercise a force majeure clause in his contract. I met with Mr. Clark and town council, and they both rejected that argument. Recently, Mr. Camara floated another letter with a change in law clause. I spoke to the acting administrator about that, And then I said, this really doesn't any good. He's already met with 2 towns, and they've simply rejected that proposal. I then requested from Mike, I said, can you just offer the town a 1-year deal at the price you're floating and needed to stay in business? And he did just that, and that is in your packet. There's no place to take the MSW, the municipal solid waste. I can't emphasize that enough. I've been in the industry for nearly 30 years. I can't get people to return my calls from disposal outlets. So all we have is ABC Disposal, Cavanta, which is CMAS, the largest waste energy plant in the state, and the town of Bourne. You may be wondering why I am here now discussing this when our contract expires in January. I was very hopeful that Dan Barrett, the general manager of the Bourne landfill, was going to be able to give us something. Over this past summer, he got us through the hump. He allocated 5 loads a week to us, which allowed us to continue with our commercial activity. He had to curtail that in September. He was very hopeful that he was going to be able to offer us something. Unfortunately, that didn't materialize. The specifics of what he was hoping is Cavanta's changing the way in which they handle their fly ash. Cavanta owns or has under contract approximately 80% of the Bourne landfill capacity, with the other 20% going to them and the town of Falmouth. And that's it. That's it. Anything else is because he has a little bit of excess capacity, and that's how he helped us out over the summer. He was hopeful that they would be reducing that, notify him, and then he didn't enter into a contract. He was unable to do that. However, they are also, the town of Bourne is working on a major expansion, and if that expansion comes, that'll be giving 20 years life expectancy to that landfill, and he anticipates being able to execute contracts with municipalities in a year or 2. Thus, my recommendation with a single-year deal right now to spread that around so we don't have all our eggs in one basket. That is execute an agreement with New Bedford Waste, execute an agreement with Cavanta. They're very similar in price, and that would allow us to hopefully open up the commercial business to the local contractors.
Questions for Link? Don, I'll start with you.
No, sounds very reasonable.
Ed?
Except for the price.
You don't set the price.
But the price, I think, is what, $90 for one and $93 for the other. Very.
$93.75.
Actually, that does bring something to mind. What does that do? Because they're pretty much linked to our fee structure about what we'd have to start charging to.
I believe the next item after these 2 contracts will attempt to address that.
Okay.
Ed?
Yeah, well, you and I, we attended the Selectmen's meeting on
More
Friday.
depressing than you, actually.
Yes, this is, you're good news. You're Mr. Jolly's compared to what we heard there. That there's very little landfill space left in the state, and nothing seems to be in the pipeline to be, except for Bourne, to be expanded. Waste-to-energy plants have stalled in their approval process, and we can anticipate, not in the too distant future, the out-of-state states that have been accepting trash trains from Massachusetts to decide, well, maybe we don't want to do that anymore. And at that point, you're looking at tonnage rates to make the trash go away of moving towards, I don't know, $200, $250 a ton, because you're going to have to invest in some very new and expensive technology to get that to happen quickly. So, thank you for the contract you were able to get for a year.
Joe?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to let the board know that the intent of Link presenting tonight is for the board to understand his strategy, and we're looking for the board's opinions on the 2 documents that he presented. If the board's agreeable, we're going to work with Link on executing agreements with those parties based on the board's direction. Okay. So it's a 2-step, if you will.
If I may, Joe, this that would be a quick process, because this has to be done by the end of the year, is that what we're told?
That's the hope and expectation, yep, that we understand that the two representatives, they're aware of the process, they stand by their term sheet.
Well, I think Link mentioned January of next year they want.
December 31st.
December 31st, our current 5-year contract with New Bedford Waste expires. He's unable to honor, because of market conditions, unable to honor the second 5-year agreement that we thought and were hopeful would be honored.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
So I think Joe just answered my question. Link, you're just basically looking for a consensus that we approve of the numbers, and then we will have a contract to review in the coming weeks?
That's correct.
Okay.
Michael, go ahead.
I move that we approve the municipal solid waste disposal recommendations for New Bedford Waste
Is there a
as
second?
presented,
Yeah, is there a second?
And there was
pending,
there was a
pending,
fallback
review.
position. No,
Pending review, no, there's another motion.
oh, okay.
Pending review of the contract.
Second.
Second. Good. Steve, we didn't,
No, I'm good.
discussion. Link, I only have one question. Would it be beneficial to try to go, say, for 2 years if we expect prices to go up, or 1 year is as far as they will go as well?
Cavanta offered a 3-year deal, which I believe is in their original thing. He wouldn't even send me another one. He just said, here's my email, that he'll honor for a 1-year deal. They offered 90, 95, and 100.
Does it make sense to pursue that if we expect prices to go up?
I don't believe so. I'm hoping that Mr. Barrett in the town of Bourne will be able to step in and relieve some of this market pressures on us.
And he'll keep the prices low, he won't be.
He's a solid waste guy. He's worked around the industry his entire life.
I'll take your opinion on that.
Yeah, I sent these documents to him, and he says, if we do something, I'm sure it will be in better terms.
Okay.
He gave a little bit of a talk and basically said, you know, he understands the problem all the other towns are in, and he's not it's a municipal service, and he's
Not going to take
hopeful
advantage.
yeah.
Okay. Any more discussion? Anyone from the audience? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Link. And Michael, we have another one?
Yeah, I'm gonna make a motion to approve the municipal solid waste disposal recommendations for Cavanta as presented pending successful contract.
Second.
This is,
Okay, further discussion? Yeah, this is just the second one of these, so. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed? Don?
Yeah, this is not to extend the meeting, but it's just a comment. Year down to is manufacturers don't care about the cost of ownership. They sell you stuff, they've got packaging that's 3 times bigger than what's inside of it. And unless something really starts happening with that, we're going to bury ourselves in trash. I'm not sure where to grapple with that. But, I mean, this obviously isn't the way, because we keep paying more, as we go along, and then people are closing the sites. Pennsylvania doesn't want to take stuff in anymore, and other states are doing it. The reality is, it's not about who's willing to take our stuff. The reality is there's too much stuff coming along with what we buy. I'm not sure what that solution looks like, but until we get at that, we'll be having this conversation pretty much every year.
Yep. Link?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to point out that we have had below-market conditions for MSW for 25 years. These Tier 1 communities, Cape communities and South Shore communities, were the financial mechanism that got CMAS built. And as a consequence of that, our original rate was $12 a ton back in 1988 when they executed the agreement. Shore has been paying $100 a ton for a very long time. We have just been very fortunate, and we've had this confluence of negative events in the industry that have happened. The recycle markets have plummeted, China stopped taking stuff, and it's all converging to drive up. We've got supply and demand, and we have more trash than we have outlets.
Okay. Thank you. So next, we voted on that, right? My memory is, So now we on to the next is, Link, stay there, because now we're talking about tip-free and for what we just agreed to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is unusual, a request of mid-fiscal year increase in a tip fee. I believe we did that once because of market conditions a couple of years ago. I would recommend that we consider moving our MSW rate from $100 a ton to $120 a ton. I make that recommendation based on two facts. One, the town, Cavanta is raising their rate of the train, the Yarmouth Transportation, effective January 1 to $110 per ton. We've always tried to maintain about a $10 delta as a convenience fee. We are more convenient than going there and waiting and possibly getting turned away. Doing so, with the two contracts you put in place, we should be able to move the 10, 11,000 tons we generally annually, and we'd be able to open this back up to commercial haulers, I think as soon as the fee is increased, where we'd be in a full cost recovery position.
Okay. For Link? Anyone care to make a motion?
No, I have a question.
Okay. Michael?
Like, what's the current tipping fees that we're paying before this increase to $93.75 and $90?
71 and change, call it 72.
And then why are we jumping, instead of going to 110, why are you suggesting 120? Just because of what Yarmouth's prices are?
That is correct. We've always, when we are anywhere near Yarmouth's price, we get inundated because we provide a cost-efficient service to the haulers. They would all prefer to come to us. We have more than we could handle. Quite frankly, because there's no waiting lines, they bill us. We bill them. The private haulers enjoy coming with us. And I look at this as more of a convenience fee than anything else. Quite frankly, we need about $20 a ton, so we ensure we're in a full cost recovery position. This is a little more than that, but if we match that price in Yarmouth, they're going to come to us, and we'll have to start turning them away. So I think at 120, and I did talk to 2 or 3 small haulers, including Bob Coffin, Jay Merchant, and one other person I contacted, and I said, "What's that number going to be like?" I didn't want to surprise them, and they knew, and I said, "For $10 premium, are you coming to me or are you going to Yarmouth?" He said, "All my small trucks will probably come to you. If I get something in the 10, 15-ton range, a very large packer, they'll probably go to Yarmouth."
Okay. Michael,
So
follow?
just to follow up, like on the money that we spend at the dump to operate the dump versus the money that we get in, what's the difference? What are we making on our dump? And I ask that because the taxpayers are going to bear this. Anyone with a trash service, Coughlin's going to certainly raise their prices if we're going to go up $27, or actually in one case $30 a ton. So they're going to pass this along to our residents. And as Angelo used to constantly harp on Harbor and Golf and not taking their money out to put it in the general fund, because you can't do that based on state law. You have to operate your prices, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, so that you're not operating at a profit.
We are in a full cost recovery position. And I've had that discussion with our finance director. And we turned in $3.3 million last year. The fee recommendation I give you generally every May has a complete analysis of the entire operation, and we try to base sticker prices or permit prices on that very fact. So that as a whole, when we capture all the costs of the operation, it is a break even.
Okay. Any more questions for Link? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. DPW Director's recommendation, I move that we accept the new rate. What was that?
120.
$120 per ton for MSW.
Exactly. That's the motion.
Second.
Any further discussion? Any from the audience? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Thank you, Link.
Thank you, and I have to commend the board on moving right along. Given the length of the agenda, I told my wife, don't expect me before 9:30.
Drive around for a while if you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, Joe, I'll turn this over to Movent. I'm not even sure I can pronounce that.
Plymouth source capture, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So as you may recall from prior procurement activities, there are the present vehicle exhaust in Firehouse Number 2 has 6 rails. We have an opportunity to add a 7th rail, which will allow us to bring equipment from headquarters over to Firehouse 2, thereby getting more equipment into headquarters. Out of an abundance of caution, I had this come before the board for the board's approval. It is under the amounts that you've typically held to administrators to, but wanted to make the board aware of this. It is a standalone item related to a previous procurement. It has been approved by the finance director as to funding availability, so we'll be looking for the board's approval on this procurement.
Any questions for Joe, or I see we have Dave here as well. But Michael?
Is this would this be a change order, Joe?
So it's not a change order because the original bid documents were to the 6-rail system. Basically just the fact that we're able to add a 7th rail, which was not anticipated.
Michael, I've asked that
Excuse
we
me.
bring all these expenses to us, nothing else being for information.
Okay, thank you. And Joe, what I didn't get was, do you recommend this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
If I may. I move that we approve the addition to the existing Plymouth Source Capture Emergency Vehicle Exhaust Fume Removal System at Fire Station 2 in the amount of $7,200.
For the administrator to sign?
For the administrator to sign.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? We'll you speak tonight then, Dave, so. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
And then if I could just add,
Talk to
I
us
do
later.
believe we are still under budget on Fire Station 2, correct?
Without having the exact numbers, David Blank, Deputy Fire Chief, we are under budget, and we actually reported at 2 meetings ago, the change orders are significantly under what is typical for a project of its size. About half, I believe, of what is typical, so.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Town Administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So in your signature packet is a memorandum agreement extension for mitigation related to Main Street Corridor Improvements Project. I believe you also have explanation from the Highway Director. That's the best I can offer at this point. I'm a little bit addled on this one, sir.
Michael?
We don't need to vote on this, we just need to sign it.
Need to
This is
sign it.
money
We've
coming
already
back
vote-
to us,
Right.
Yep,
not money spent.
Yeah.
that was a good thing.
Is related to the DHY Clean Waters Professional Services Agreement. So this is an agreement that is to be executed between CDM Smith and the town of Harwich. It's Harwich's expense related to DHY-related engineering services. It's also the item that will eventually be peer-reviewed by Weston and Sampson. This item is presently being vetted by procurement, legal, and CDM Smith. So we expect the board to have a fully vetted and executed document next week for the board to sign regarding CDM Smith. The related item, the Weston and Sampson, quite frankly, it had gone on so long with negotiation, if you will, through language changes back and forth with Weston and Sampson, that I took up the town of Yarmouth on their offer for the town of Yarmouth to bear the burden of contractual language with Weston and Sampson for peer review. So the net effect is the town of Harwich would only be responsible for the $6,000 payment. It was becoming too cumbersome. It was becoming too much of an impact on the project overall. So I made the decision to take up the administrator's offer in Yarmouth for them to do that. It doesn't change any of the concepts of the peer review services. And in fact, all three towns have already validated the expenditure of the $6,000 each. So I wanted to bring the two items back for an update to the board. Essentially, CDM Smith, full contract next week. Weston and Sampson peer review, the town will only be responsible for their $6,000 share.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. The effort on this, basically, and Don's been involved with this peer review, was to affirm that we're going forward, but just be sure the contract was in place correctly. Don, you have any comments or questions?
No, we're going to be taking up any loose ends on Friday anyway.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
no.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. We'll go ahead.
One last item, Mr. Chairman, just want to remind the board on the fiscal year 2021 timeline. As I mentioned earlier this evening, the finance director and I have met several times with members of Capital Outlay. The capital outlay plan will be presented to the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee next week as required under the charter, not on the December 9th goal, but ahead of the end of December requirement of the charter. I just wanted to make sure we could speak intelligently to that.
And I would encourage, we'll have that in our packet. Encourage us all to look at that because, you know, with our fiscal budget constraints, if you will, we may have to make some tough decisions going forward on the capital outlay. I don't know that for a fact, but I want to be sure we have a good discussion.
And to that point, Mr. Chairman, the next follow-up would be a joint meeting of this board, the Finance Committee, and Capital Outlay at the hearing to happen on Monday, January 6th, relative
Right.
to that plan.
Yep.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Joe. We're into then Selectmen's report. Steve, I'll start with you. We've been go back and forth.
I'm good at the moment. I'm talked up.
Michael? Kathy? Ed?
Nope.
Don?
Sorry. Yeah, but this is kind of important, guys. The Housing Trust met last week. They elected me chair of
Saw
that.
that. Congratulations.
Condolences.
That brings up a couple of things. I mean, as I said to them, and it's going to relate to you folks, we had a contract grant acceptance for the CPC that was just given to me to sign. Maybe I'm much more of a purist on these things, but I expect this to operate a lot more publicly and a lot more collaboratively than it's been. So to start it off, I had them vote to authorize the chair to sign, but that has more implications to it because I want to make sure that periodically the trust comes back to the Board of Selectmen and gives some reports about where we are and what we're doing. We have admittedly created priorities without actually understanding what our work process was going to be, so that's going to happen over the next few months also as we establish criteria for things that come in and how they fit in with the overall town's objectives. But most importantly, I really feel that it's important that the Board of Selectmen hear what's going on and not just have to go on YouTube to see what the meeting looked like. Also, I went back to the bylaw and it says the town administrator or designee. Really unclear who designates that because it's an ex officio thing for them to sit on it, but it's unclear whether the Board of Selectmen would make the designation an alternate to the town administrator or the town administrator himself or herself. But that being said, because that was one thing Chris sat on, so even if in a future agenda, even if you were to act on Joe's recommendation and or have Joe for whatever period of time that is limited to until such time as this permanent successor is made, nonetheless, there has to be some sort of designation so that he could sit there or somebody else, because otherwise we're going to be down to 4 people. And since one of them, this board has allowed to do remote participation, you got to have 3 people sitting in a room to even open a meeting for the quorum.
Thank you, Don. Are you you're volunteering to work with Joe and legal, whoever is to bring that process to us, so it's in place?
wanted us,
To have a general
wanted to hear that
discussion
from
first.
us so that I could do that. I mean, it's presumptuous for me to operate on my own.
There's no
I've had a
objection.
conversation with Joe, and I think he wanted to sit but not be an officer, but that's
Okay.
something, if you authorize me to do that, then I will have that
Well, there's
conversation
no
officially.
objection. We authorize you to do that.
Okay.
Does bring up a side point that, I'll get ahead of you, Don, but Joel, could you, we brought this up, I think, a couple weeks ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago now. Could you give us a data point on where we are with all the revolving funds? How much money are in those accounts?
Absolutely can do. Carol and I have 2 meetings this week on the budget, so we can incorporate that
yeah.
discussion to bring back to the board.
'Cause I think our board discussion in the past has been, we don't want to kill anyone, but at least semi-annually, I think it would make sense to get you suggested quarterly.
Yeah, we
but-
had, Mr. Chair, if I might, we agreed to quarterly, but it was more, not driven so much as to give us a trial balance in each of these accounts, as much as to assure ourselves that somebody's looking at these things in terms of the legitimacy of purchasing them under the criteria that the revolving fund was
well,
established.
Let's get one of those, and then we'll see where we
Sure.
stand.
I'll make
Okay.
a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Michael. Second?
Second.
Thank you, guys.